Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. We're going to start out with David Huddleston, who died recently at the age of 85, and he's best known for two memorable roles. The first is his portrayal of Olson Johnson in 1974's comedy classic Blazing Saddles. In the scene in the movie that's a parody of the church scene in High Noon, he does a takeoff on the Thomas Mitchell character.
Now, who can argue with that? Reverend, I think we're all indebted to Gabby Johnson for clearly stating what needed to be said. I'm particularly glad that these lovely children are here today to hear that speech. Not only was it authentic frontier gibberish, it expressed a courage little seen in this day and age. What are we made of? Our fathers came across the prairie, fought Indians, fought drought, fought locusts, fought Dix. Remember when Richard Dix came in here and tried to take over this town? But we didn't give up then. And by gum, we're not going to give up now. Reverend.
David Huddleston's even more memorable role is in the 1998 Coen Brothers classic, The Big Lebowski, where the plot hinges on him being confused with Jeff Bridges' character, the Dude. They're both named Lebowski, and that sets off an improbable chain of events.
Are you employed, sir? Employed? You don't go out looking for a job dressed like that, do you? On a weekday? What day is this? Well, I do work, sir. So if you don't mind...
Oh, I do mind. The dude minds. This will not stand, you know? This aggression will not stand, man. I mean, your wife owes me...
My wife is not the issue here. I hope someday my wife will learn to live on her allowance, which is ample. But if she does not, that is her problem, not mine. Just as the rug is your problem. Just as every bum's lot in life is his own responsibility, regardless of who he chooses to blame. I didn't blame anyone for the loss of my legs. Some Chinaman took them from me in Korea, but I went out and achieved anyway. I cannot solve your problems.
Yes, as he says a little later in that scene, the revolution is over, Mr. Lebowski. Condolences. The bum's lost. My advice is to do what your parents did. Get a job, sir. The bums will always lose. We're going to move on now to Chris Sizemore, who died recently at the age of 89. And Chris Sizemore was perhaps the most well-known multiple personality victim in history. This is as the result of the portrayal of her by Joanne Woodward in the 1957 film The Three Faces of Eve. Joanne Woodward won the Academy Award for Best Actress that year. And in fact, Chris Sizemore didn't wind up having three personalities. She wound up having more than 20. Joanne Woodward's portrayal concentrated on the three main ones: Eve White, a demure Southern girl; Eve Black, her counterpart, who was a wild partygoer; and Jane, a third personality that was probably closest to what Chris Sizemore's real personality was. Here's the trailer from the movie, narrated by Nunley Johnson, the great screenwriter who was responsible for it. Joanne Woodward was superb. She did deserve the Academy Award. Also starred two of my favorites, Lee J. Cobb and David Wayne, and Nancy Culp, a.k.a. Jane Hathaway in the Beverly Hillbillies, also had a part in it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have entered a soundstage at 20th Century Fox Studio for a visit with Nunley Johnson, writer, producer, and director, who gave you How to Marry a Millionaire, and the man in the gray flannel suit. Mr. Johnson is directing the exciting young star Joanne Woodward, David Wayne, and Lee J. Cobb in The Three Faces of Eve.
There are three characters in Three Faces of Eve who occupy one body, female. This female is married. This is a true story, the most completely documented case of multiple personality in the history of medicine. The book from which this account was taken, also called The Three Faces of Eve, the Reader's Digest Book Club Choice.
Maybe he wants to get Bonnie away from me.
You mean by divorce?
No, maybe not that, but he could make me believe I'm losing my mind.
Is that what you think he's trying to do?
Well, I don't know what else it could be the way he tells it. Am I?
She is a bit livelier then as the second of the personalities. Eve Black, a girl who loved nothing better than a few hookers of gin and a romp with a stranger.
Don't you want to give me one?
Well, I never seen you take a drink before.
Hey, there are a lot of things you never seen me do before. There's no sign I don't do. Thrill me. Let your kisses thrill me. Just like you and you alone. time. Hold me, honey, and for me. Never hold me from you.
And then this third specimen of young womanhood finally emerges.
Please, Mama, please don't make me. Please don't make me, Mama. Please don't. Please don't.
What happened, Jane? Under the house?
She made me kiss her. No.
Part was originally supposed to go to Judy Garland, but by then she was having her own problems. June Allison was said to have been considered for the role, but her husband Dick Powell talked her out of it. Apparently, when Chris Sizemore signed for the contract for the movie, the studio had her sign 3 separate contracts under each of her 3 personalities so they'd be covered from any possible legal action. And in fact, when she signed the contract, they actually had her go into the personalities, and the signatures were all different on the contracts. Chris Sizemore went on to write 2 books about her multiple personality problem. She wrote I'm Eve in 1977 and A Mind of My Own in 1989. I think she claimed to having 26 personalities in total. She also had some problems over the rights to the story with one of her therapists, and they had a big fight about it, but I think eventually that was settled. The movie ends up with sort of a happy ending, but I don't think Chris Sizemore ever had a happy life. We're going to move on now to John Saunders, who died recently at the age of 61. John Saunders was one of the most influential African-American sports broadcasters in the United States. He worked for ESPN for 30 years, probably best known for his work on Baseball America, but he was quite a versatile guy, and he was also a role model, a mentor to many of the younger African-American sports broadcasters. Here's Hannah Storm, who also announced the death of Stuart Scott, whose podcast we did about a year ago, and you can tell she's quite broken up about the death of her colleague.
I have some shocking and sad news to report to you. Our generous and talented and beloved colleague John Saunders has died. John is one of the most familiar on-air faces at ESPN. You know him. He has been at ESPN for nearly 30 years, covering college football, basketball, the NHL, in addition, of course, to co-hosting this program, SportsCenter, and most recently a fixture on the Sports Reporters. Born in Canada, Saunders was an all-star defenseman in the junior hockey leagues in Montreal before becoming one of the most prominent broadcasters of our day. Also a founding board member of the Jimmy V Foundation, such a critical part of John's legacy and the difference that he has made in this world, all the work that he has done for cancer research, and that foundation named for his longtime college basketball partner. John Skipper, the president of ESPN, co-chairman of the Disney Media Networks, has issued this statement, and I quote, "John was an extraordinary talent, and his friendly, informative style has been a warm welcome to sports fans for decades. His wide range of accomplishments across numerous sports and championship events is among the most impressive this industry has ever seen. More importantly, John was a beloved and devoted family man who cared deeply about people and causes, as evidenced by his long-standing efforts as a passionate board member for the V Foundation for Cancer Research. He was one of the most significant and influential members of the ESPN family, as a colleague and a mentor, and he will be sorely missed. Our thoughts are with his loved ones at this difficult time, and our sympathy, love, and support goes out to all of those who loved and respected our colleague, John Saunders."
We're going to move on to our feature tonight, Glenn Yarbrough, who died recently at the age of 86. Glenn Yarbrough was one of my favorite folk singers. There's not a better voice in folk music than Glenn Yarbrough. He grew up in Milwaukee and moved to New York in the early 50s. His parents were social worker liberals. He went to Greenwich Village. He got the folk singing bug. Folk singing was just starting to pick up when he heard Woody Guthrie in the mid-50s. And then he moved back to Chicago, where he hooked up with Albert Grossman, who could see the folk singing trend emerging before most. And Albert Grossman heard Glenn Yarbrough's beautiful tenor voice. He loved it. How could you not love this tenor voice? So Glenn Yarbrough started singing folk songs on Wells Street in Old Town, every on's in a while in Hyde Park. He's one of the first to sing The House of the Rising Sun. Listen to a little bit of his version from the late 1950s.
There is a house in New Orleans they call the rising sun, and it's been the ruin of a many poor girl. Me, oh God, I'm one.
Hey, guy sings like that, you know he's going places. He hooked up with a guy named Alex Hasselev, who played guitar, banjo, and sang bass. And they were doing a gig out in Los Angeles in the summer of '59, and now folk singing has really taken off. They were doing a duet in a place called Cosmo Alley when a guy walked in named Lou Gottlieb. He was a musicologist, and he thought that the three of them could sing together and sing backup for the Kingston Trio, who was the #1 folk singing group in America at the time. But when they put everything together, they realized they weren't backup singers. They had a group, and they started doing gigs all over the West. They were in Aspen, Colorado, in a place called the Limelight that Alex and Glenn had bought the year before. They were singing for the rich ski bums out in Aspen, but they were sounding really good, and they thought to perfect their act, they would go to San Francisco. And the place to go to San Francisco in the early 1960s, if you were a folk singer, was the Hungry Eye. The manager of the place asked them what the name of their group was. They didn't have a name. He asked them where they were from. They said they were from the Limelight in Aspen. And he said, "You're now the Limeliters." Within a year, the Limeliters were one of the top folk singing groups in the United States. And Glenn Yarbrough was the lead singer with that gorgeous tenor voice.
This train runs to Memphis, Fort Worth, and Mexico. She rolls through East St. Louis, and she never does it slow. As she glides through Colorado, you can hear an awful squall. You can tell her by her whistle. Listen to the jingle, the rumble, and the roar. As she glides along the woodland, through the hills and by the shore. She's mighty tall and handsome, and she's known quite well by all. You can find no equal to the Wabash Cannonball.
Yeah, in the early 60s, before the Kennedy assassination, that's what folk music sounded like. Then Bob Dylan hijacked it, it took a different turn, and then the Beatles came. Here's a little bit of Glenn Yarbrough and the Limeliters in 1963 on a program called Hootenanny. They actually had a primetime program called Hootenanny where they had folk singers sing on American campuses. And here they were at George Washington University singing a little bit of The Lonely Traveler, one of their biggest songs.
I'm a weary and a lonesome traveler. I've been a traveling on. I traveled cold in the night, traveled hungry, Lord. I traveled cold in the night, traveled hungry, Lord. I traveled cold in the night, traveled hungry, Lord. I've been a traveling on. I traveled in the mountains, traveled down in the valley, Lord. I traveled in the mountains, traveled down in the valley, Lord. I traveled in the mountains, traveled down in the valley, Lord. I've been a traveling on.
It's an old Weaver song that just screams 1963. For as popular as they were, my favorite thing they did was not a folk song. In the late 50s and early 60s, Coca-Cola used to get the popular rock stars and folk singers to do Coke jingles. And the Limeliters version of the Coke jingle featuring Glenn Yarbrough was the best I heard, with the possible exception of the Everly Brothers version, which we played on the Phil Everly podcast.
Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, things go better with Coca-Cola, things go better with Coke. Life is much more fun when you're refreshed. And Coke refreshes you best. It's the refreshingest. Food goes better with fun, goes better with you, go better with Coke. The real life one puts extra fun in you and everything you do. So things go better with Coca-Cola. Things go better with Coke.
I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. The Limeliters broke up. They were in a plane crash that sort of shook them up. They reformed in the 70s, then they broke up again. Glenn Yarbrough would make enough money touring to sail his boat in the Pacific, and then he'd go out and tour again. We're going to close tonight with a song that he sang in 1965, one of the great underrated songs in rock and roll. This is when he was solo. It's the title song to the 1965 movie starring Steve McQueen and Lee Remick, Baby, the Rain Must Fall. Great Glenn Yarbrough performance.
Hollywood Go-Go welcomes back Glenn Yarbrough. Glenn, the last time you were on the show, you had just bought the Adventures in Paradise big, huge 85-foot boat, the Tiki. How come you buy a boat like that?
Well, that's been a dream of mine all my life, I guess, to buy a boat that I can sail around the world with.
Just to relax and sail around the world and have no cares at all?
Yeah, that's right. That's what I want to do.
Have you sailed anywhere so far around the world or anywhere?
Well, not around the world, mainly because I got to pay for the boat now. I got to get hit records. Baby, the rain must fall.